Until this morning, for the past 111 years, historians have meticulously examined every detail of the Titanic tragedy. Despite over a century of research, there are still aspects of this disastrous event that remain unknown to many. The Titanic story and the catastrophe that turned it into a historical icon continue to captivate people worldwide. Join us on this epic journey as we explore remarkable images that preserve the history of this momentous event, offering an in-depth tour of the occurrences before, during, and after the disaster. In a never-before-seen discovery, we delve into the contents of an old camera found deep in the ocean, revealing horrifying Titanic photos. While you won't find skeletons, since bones dissolve rapidly at such depths, these images uncover hidden aspects of the Titanic's story. The construction of the Titanic is an excellent starting point for this exploration, taking us back to March 31, 1909, an unforgettable day when work began on this marvel in Belfast, Ireland. The shipbuilding company Harland and Wolff undertook the construction, and the designers and engineers employed all their creativity and skill to make the Titanic an iconic symbol of maritime engineering. The RMS Titanic was one of 3 Olympic-class ocean liners, alongside the RMS Olympic and the HMHS Britannic. Tragically, each ship in the class faced disaster. Although the Titanic's sinking remains the most infamous, largely due to the hype surrounding its construction, it gained mass popularity even before its assembly was complete. People eagerly anticipated the day this ocean titan would set sail, unaware that its maiden voyage would also be its last. At the time, White Star Line, the company that owned the Titanic, was thriving. Business was booming, and the future appeared bright. No one could have foreseen the tragic twist of fate that would nearly ruin the company. Early photographs from the Titanic's construction offer a portal back in time, showcasing the grandeur of this doomed vessel as it loomed over every surrounding structure. At its time of construction, the Titanic was a marvel of engineering. Its vision was bold, and the engineers, designers, and craftsmen worked tirelessly to ensure everything was executed flawlessly. With a budget of over £3 million, equivalent to approximately £310 million today, no expense was spared. The Titanic's immense size was one of its defining features. Measuring 882 feet and 9 inches in length, with a maximum breadth of 92 feet and 6 inches, the ship was a giant of its time. Its total height, from the base of the keel to the top of the bridge, reached an impressive 104 feet. While these numbers might not entirely capture the scale of the Titanic, they underscore the ambition and grandeur that defined this engineering masterpiece. These images should help you picture the unrivaled beauty and imposing size that made the Titanic worth all the hype. However, there is a darker side to this story. From its inception, the Titanic seemed to be haunted by an aura of misfortune. Even before it set sail, the ship had been claiming lives in shocking numbers. Over the course of its 2-year construction, 8 workers lost their lives due to a series of strange accidents. Finally, on March 31, 1912, the Titanic was officially commissioned. The event garnered international attention, with people eager to witness the unveiling of the world's newest maritime marvel. But as the world would soon discover, disaster loomed ominously on the horizon, and no one could have foreseen how events would unfold. For 2 years, the world eagerly awaited the completion of the Titanic, a behemoth destined to make history as it sailed the high seas. On April 10, 1912, before a crowd of about 100,000 spectators, including reporters from across the globe, the Titanic prepared for its maiden voyage. This, however, was not the ship's first time on water. It had made its way from Belfast, where it was built, to Southampton on April 2, 1912. The much-anticipated voyage was scheduled to transport thousands of passengers, including some of the wealthiest and most influential figures of the time, from Southampton, England, to New York City, USA. It was an event that captured global attention, but no one expected the journey to end in tragedy within such a short period. The planned route included stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, before reaching New York. The return trip was intended to follow a path from New York to Plymouth, Cherbourg, and back to Southampton. At the time of the Titanic's departure, an ongoing coal strike posed a significant challenge. The coal used to power the ship was scavenged from other vessels within the White Star Line fleet. Although the strike ended before the Titanic set sail, there was not enough time to deliver the necessary supplies. The ship's passenger certificate allowed it to carry a maximum of 3,547 people, including 905 first-class passengers, 564 second-class passengers, and 1,134 third-class passengers. Manning this massive maritime machine were 944 officers and crew members, many of whom would later make the ultimate sacrifice to save as many passengers as possible during the disaster. As the Titanic prepared to leave the harbor, a brief but significant incident occurred that could have delayed the voyage and, perhaps, even prevented the ensuing tragedy. When the Titanic began moving from its stationary position, the massive displacement of water caused by the liner's size affected the SS New York, a nearby ship docked in the same yard. The SS New York broke free from its moorings and swung dangerously toward the Titanic. Thousands of onlookers watched in horror, fearing a collision. Thankfully, the situation was managed effectively, and the Titanic continued on its journey. After the Titanic's tragic sinking, many began to speculate about whether this initial delay was a sign from the universe, a warning of troubled waters ahead. Could the disaster have been averted if the Titanic had never left the docks? That remains a question we may never fully answer. On that fateful day, these pictures from the Titanic's maiden voyage give us a glimpse into the scale of its impact and popularity. They transport us back in time to the moments preceding one of the most famous maritime disasters in recorded history. As the Titanic departed, many aboard were oblivious to the fact that trouble was already brewing in the coal bunkers. Did you know that the Titanic was on fire when it set sail for the first time? As unbelievable as it may seem, the ocean liner had been battling a blazing inferno that threatened to engulf the coal bunkers for 10 straight days before its departure. For over 100 years, there has been ongoing debate about the role the fire may have played in the eventual fate of the Titanic. In a photograph, the fire damage on the hull is clearly visible, suggesting the ship was destined for disaster from the start. According to reports released by the inquiry launched shortly after the event, workers tasked with maintaining the ship battled the coal fire below deck for days but were unable to extinguish it. While the main cause of the fire remains unclear, the devastating damage it caused to the ship's structural integrity is undeniable. Although it is well established that the fire was not directly responsible for the sinking, it significantly influenced how the tragedy unfolded. Journalist Sen Moloney, who has been working to solve the mysteries surrounding the Titanic tragedy, discovered photographs hidden in an attic in England. These pictures reveal a noticeable 30-foot-long dark mark on the hull, evidence of the fire's damage. Coincidentally, this was the exact spot where the Titanic later collided with the iceberg, sealing its fate. Considering these discoveries, one cannot help but wonder if the outcome would have been different had the fire not compromised the ship's side. But another question arises: why did the ship's officials decide to set sail despite knowing the dangers lurking beneath? Was it overconfidence or a sheer disregard for the safety of the passengers and crew? This remains a mystery. However, this critical detail demonstrates that the sinking of the Titanic was the result of several interconnected issues that plagued the ship even before it set sail. It was a perfect storm of unrelated problems culminating in one of history's most infamous disasters. The iceberg that ultimately sank the Titanic is another significant element in this tragic tale. On April 14, 1912, the ship met its doom while cruising through the night, unaware that the area was filled with icebergs capable of sinking even the unsinkable Titanic. Speculation suggests that the iceberg may have originated from the Jakobshavn Glacier near Disco Bay on Greenland's west coast. Formed in 1910 or 1911, the iceberg likely drifted northward with the West Greenland Current, setting the stage for its fateful encounter with the Titanic. As Captain Edward John Smith and his crew set sail for New York aboard the Titanic, they were fully aware that the drift ice field was larger and more southerly than in previous years. Additionally, the Titanic received several radio reports from other ships warning of looming ice fields and icebergs. The first warning came from the French ship La Lorraine, which alerted the Titanic at around 5:46 p.m. on April 12, reporting thick field ice in the same area where the Titanic would later meet its tragic end. On April 13, the Titanic encountered the steamer Rapin, heading east. While it remains uncertain whether Rapin informed the Titanic of the dangerous waters ahead, the steamer had also sustained considerable damage from the ice fields, raising the possibility that they shared critical information. On the day of the disaster, the Titanic received multiple reports of ice fields, all of which were ignored. The first came from the Coronia at about 9:12 a.m., warning of icebergs, growlers, and large fields of ice. Captain Smith, confident in his ship, responded with a simple acknowledgement of thanks. Later, at approximately 11:47 a.m., the Dutch ship Noordam relayed another ice warning via the Coronia, cautioning the Titanic about the perilous journey ahead. Once again, Captain Smith dismissed the message with apparent nonchalance. Throughout the day, additional warnings from other ships went unheeded, and by nightfall, the Titanic collided with an iceberg and sank, resulting in the deaths of over 1,500 passengers and crew members. Years later, scientists uncovered an old camera deep in the ocean, revealing haunting photographs of the Titanic. Among these discoveries is the story of Seaman W. Wood, a photographer and captain of the SS Estonian. Just 2 days before the Titanic's sinking, Wood had sighted a massive iceberg, remarkable in size, and photographed it, noting down its coordinates. Coincidentally, the coordinates matched the location where the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank. While it is impossible to confirm with certainty if this was the infamous iceberg responsible for the tragedy, the evidence strongly suggests it may have been the very one that sealed the Titanic's fate. The alignment of the coordinates remains a powerful testament to this possibility, marking one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. An eyewitness account of the event comes from Dr. Washington Dodge, a first-class passenger who documented the Titanic's final hours. His testimony, written in a letter after he was rescued by the Carpathia, stands as one of the most vivid records of that fateful night. Dr. Dodge, a prominent doctor, banker, and politician from San Francisco, boarded the Titanic in Southampton with his wife Ruth and their son Washington Dodge Jr. According to his account, the trouble began at 11:40 p.m., when he and his wife were rudely awakened by the ship's collision with the iceberg. His hurried, careless handwriting in the letter reflects the shock and emotional turmoil of that moment, offering a deeply personal glimpse into the chaos and despair of the Titanic's final hours. Dodge reported that he immediately sprang to his feet and headed to the deck to obtain information on the damage, intending to ensure the safety of his family. However, he was told there was no danger at all, so he decided to go back to bed. Despite this reassurance, he wasn't at ease and soon went out again seeking information. It was then that his steward informed him that everyone had been ordered to wear life jackets. At this point, it became obvious that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Without wasting any time, Dodge and his family quickly ascended to the starboard boat deck, where he secured a spot for his wife and son on Lifeboat 3, the second boat launched from that side of the ship. In Dr. Dodge's testimony, he recounted details of bias and mismanagement as the crisis unfolded. One notable example was the fact that most of the lifeboats deployed were half full, meaning they could have carried more passengers to safety and saved more lives. There was also a rule that prioritized rescuing women and children before any men, which, while intended to save lives, led to more casualties than necessary. This policy highlighted the poor management of such a tragic event. As Fifth Officer Lowe started filling the lifeboats on the starboard side, Dodge managed to secure a spot on one. However, the journey wasn't smooth. As the lifeboat was being lowered into the calm waters, the passengers noticed they were descending directly into a torrent of water being expelled from the ship's condenser pump. The force of the water was immense and posed a significant danger to those aboard the lifeboat. Recognizing the imminent threat, the men cried out, and fortunately, the crisis was averted. Dodge's account remains one of the most compelling narratives of the events that unfolded that night in the Atlantic, offering a vivid perspective on an event still cloaked in mystery. A recently discovered image, found in an old camera retrieved from the deep ocean, captures one of the most perilous moments of the Titanic disaster. As water filled the ship's compartments, chaos ensued, with passengers scrambling for safety. This photo immortalizes the desperate fight for survival, uniting people of all ages, classes, and backgrounds in a collective struggle against overwhelming odds. It serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity to endure even in the face of unimaginable adversity. In the final hours of the Titanic's journey, rescue operations were underway to evacuate as many passengers as possible. Lifeboats were loaded and launched into the cold, dark night. With 2,229 people aboard the ship, it is shocking that the Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, of which only 18 were used. Many lifeboats were not filled to capacity due to fears that they might buckle under the weight, exacerbating the tragedy. Adding to this was the reluctance of lifeboat crews to return for survivors. Reports suggest that officials were afraid of being overwhelmed by drowning victims or pulled under by the suction caused by the sinking ship, leaving many helpless passengers to perish in the icy depths. This glaring lack of lifeboats and reluctance to rescue those in the water remain critical points of contention and inquiry regarding the disaster. The truth remains that the Titanic was constructed in line with the standard safety protocols and maritime safety regulations of its time. The vessel carried the required number of lifeboats, which suggests that it adhered to the safety expectations of the era. However, this adherence also highlights a glaring issue: the outdated nature of these safety regulations. Compounding the tragedy was the revelation that the White Star Line prioritized aesthetics over safety, deliberately minimizing the number of lifeboats on board. According to shipbuilders, the Titanic was designed to float longer in the event of an accident, ensuring the rescue of nearly all passengers before disaster struck. Unfortunately, events did not unfold as planned, and the ship sank far more quickly than anticipated. To this day, the inadequate provision of lifeboats continues to spark discussions about the ethical implications of the decisions that led to the unnecessary deaths of thousands of passengers. The ship's breakage remains a central enigma in the Titanic tragedy. One critical question is why the ship broke into two parts during its descent. Within minutes of the collision, the Titanic had already taken on significant amounts of water through a breach in its hull. This breach was exacerbated by a smoldering fire concealed in the coal bunker, which weakened the hull's integrity. As seawater rapidly flooded lower compartments, passengers gradually realized that the ship was doomed, although few expected it to sink so quickly. The flooding created a severe imbalance in the ship's weight distribution. Given the Titanic's immense length of over 882 feet, this imbalance placed enormous stress on the already compromised hull. At approximately 2:17 a.m., just over 2 hours after the collision, the hull began to fracture under the pressure. The split occurred between the third and fourth funnels, areas of structural weakness exacerbated by the use of brittle iron rivets in the ship's construction. Despite the Titanic's virtually unlimited construction budget, the decision to employ such substandard materials remains puzzling and unresolved. While it is unclear whether the ship's breaking in half contributed to its rapid sinking, the event itself is a monumental aspect of the tragedy. Survivors watched in horror as the ship broke apart, its final remnants disappearing into the frigid Atlantic and dragging thousands of lives into the depths. Captain Edward John Smith's role during the disaster remains a subject of debate and speculation. Eyewitness accounts suggest that Captain Smith appeared on the bridge shortly after the Titanic collided with the iceberg. As the events of that fateful night unfolded, the captain faced the crushing realization that this catastrophe marked the end of the legacy he had built over more than 4 decades. Many have criticized Captain Smith for neglecting to prioritize a lifeboat drill, instead allowing the crew's time to be directed toward less critical activities. While the specifics of his actions that night remain uncertain, his decisions and indecisions have been scrutinized in the years since the tragedy. The decision made by the captain of the Titanic eventually played a crucial role in the events that unfolded during the tragedy. If a drill had been conducted, the crew and passengers might have been better prepared to handle the disaster, potentially saving many more lives. As the Titanic sank deeper into the dark waters of the Atlantic, the captain was reportedly heavily involved in rescue efforts. One account even tells of his bravery in rescuing a baby, swimming to deliver the infant to a lifeboat. When survivors offered him a place on the lifeboat, he is said to have declined, choosing instead to go down with the ship. These stories highlight the captain's remarkable courage, but not everyone agrees with this portrayal. On the other hand, some accounts suggest that the captain was absent during the critical moments of the night, abandoning his men when his leadership was most needed. This conflicting narrative raises questions about the captain's role and actions during the disaster. Whether he was a hero or a figure of failure remains a subject of debate. Adding to the mystery is the unresolved question of the captain's fate. While many believe he perished with the ship, others speculate he survived the tragedy and lived anonymously on a secluded island. This theory, fueled by the fact that his body was never recovered, has never been confirmed and should be approached with skepticism. Captain Smith's role in the Titanic disaster continues to be a story of intrigue and speculation, leaving us to wonder if he should be remembered as a hero or a villain. The discovery of the Titanic wreck added another layer of fascination to its story. In the days following the ship's sinking, discussions about locating the wreckage began. However, the early 20th century technology was not advanced enough to undertake such a task. Several basic attempts were made, but serious efforts to locate the wreckage did not occur until the latter half of the 20th century. One notable expedition was led by Robert Ballard in August 1985, in collaboration with the American and French governments. Using a U.S. Navy research ship and a remote-controlled camera called the Argo, the team explored the ocean floor nearly 13,000 feet below the surface. For the first time since 1912, the Titanic was seen lying in two parts on the seabed, marking a historic moment in maritime exploration. The allure of the Titanic has remained strong, capturing global attention even more than a century after the tragedy. Recently, a deep-sea mapping company released the first-ever full-size digital scan of the Titanic, offering a new perspective on the world's most famous shipwreck. While numerous expeditions have explored the wreckage since its discovery in 1985, its vast size and remote location have made it challenging to fully document. Thanks to advanced technology developed by Mellon Limited, scientists have now created a detailed digital twin of the wreckage, including the bow, stern, and debris field spanning 3 to 5 miles. This groundbreaking imagery provides an unprecedented level of detail and has been hailed as the largest underwater scanning project in history. It generated an astonishing 16 terabytes of data, including more than 715,000 still images and high-resolution 4K video footage. With this new information, researchers are optimistic about exploring previously inaccessible parts of the wreckage, piecing together more of the Titanic's lost history. This monumental achievement allows us to see the ship in ways never before possible, helping to deepen our understanding of this tragic event.